from Tactile Technology, and a slightly different layout on my screen today. I've been tinkering around with the way I set out the actual layouts, and I'm actually getting ready to do some personal videos for people, so slightly different look and feel to how I've got it set up at the moment. So hopefully you like it. But Mondays, it's Diamanti Monday, and we normally talk about some of the technology around delivering containers, orchestrators like Kubernetes, and cross-platform organization of applications and data. But I'm going to talk about something slightly different today. So it's the first day of the Worldwide Servitization Conference, and it's actually a virtual conference, which it's the first one I've attended. It's quite strange because you're actually going through a web page into different parts of effectively a virtual conference center. So you can go into the exhibition hall and click onto some of the exhibition stands, and we're actually one of the exhibitors there. You can also go into the auditoriums and see the speeches from some of the keynote speakers, also some panel sessions that are going on throughout the next 3 days. So it's been quite interesting, but one of the things that came out of one of the first keynote speakers is how a lot of these organizations are moving towards more digital services that they're delivering. And it doesn't matter whether you're a manufacturer of earth moving equipment, whether you provide defense equipment to countries and armies and very large sets of infrastructure to maintain and manage it. It's all very similar around this digital side of things and where you're going with it. So what I did was pull a few ideas together, and some of it's based on some information that I've gained today while I've been on the sessions about what people are trying to do, and some of the key areas around the digital side that people are doing but they've not done before is things like cloud infrastructure as a service, cloud applications or software as a service, delivering cloud management and security, which seems to be a bit of a concern for a lot of people. Also IoT connectivity and telco connectivity, because sometimes you need to use something like a 4G, 5G or less signal to be able to get to these IoT devices. I'll talk a little bit more about IoT and OT and IT data in a little while as well. And finally then using things like machine learning and artificial intelligence around that. And so they're the key things that people are trying to get towards, where is traditionally they'd be delivering a product, maybe a military vehicle or an earth moving piece of equipment or a boiler, it could be if you're in the heating game. And then what they've done is categorised, some of the actual key players and where they fit. And really down this bottom end here is where majority of the big players in the marketplace, like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and Microsoft's Azure platform sit. But in reality, they're not delivering you anything other than the capability of doing something. It doesn't actually do anything out of the box. You can create a virtual machine, you can create a container and run it in an environment there. You can store data there, but it doesn't really give you the ability to do anything with it, really. You've got to take an idea of what you want to do with the information, then convert it into some kind of workload and deliver something on the back of it. So what I've done is thought about a couple of key areas that you might be in. So for my space, IT, so information technology, we generate massive amounts of information, and that information can be anything from a metric to an event type activity. So, think about metrics within, say, a switch environment, so a network switch. It's going to provide you some metrics around the amount of packets have been transmitted, how many have to be retransmitted, how many failed packets have been dropped. Are we getting any jitter on the network or anything? So talking about some of the metric pieces. We might have events. An event may be a failure of something, so a power supply failure on a dual power supply switch, a port failure or a cable failure could be reported from that switch as well as an event such as a reconfiguration. So someone's changed the VLAN settings on a particular port, or if it was a WAN-based system, some further things like BGP or some of the other protocols have been reconfigured. So there's a lot of things we can do on the IT world. The other world which is becoming very popular is the IoT world, so the Internet of Things. So people are actually connecting large amounts of small items from, in the consumer space, thermostats and security cameras in people's homes, including smart lighting systems as well. Philips Hue and these people have got a very large number of these IoT devices now, and you may want to collate information from those. And again, it comes down to two main areas: metrics that you want to capture, and also maybe some event data. So if we look at it from a metrics perspective, and we're looking at IoT data in a consumer world, we might want to keep track of the temperature that the room is and what we've got set on the thermostat, and then we can see the amount of heat requirement we've got, or the need, and as we move towards that. We could also capture the rate of change of temperature in there as well. So lots of different metrics we might want to capture in there. Some other events might be if you've got an IoT based alarm system and it reports it's seen movement from a camera or some kind of PIR type system, understand there's movement in the house, or one of the actual magnetic sensors on a door or window has been triggered because that door or window has been opened as well. So there's quite a lot in that IoT space. If we move that to the more of the commercial area, we have a lot more potential there. So out in open spaces, it could be security cameras providing information on what's happening, but also it could be something like smart lighting systems and reporting the amount of power consumption, but also if they've got, say, solar or wind powered capabilities on them, to actually capture those metrics as well. So bring back the amount of power that's been generated from wind or solar, also the amount of time that they've been able to generate that power. So how much wind have we had today, over what period, how much sun have we had over what period, so we can actually capture metrics around that, so we can understand how efficient these systems are going to be. It could be something like air quality data, so understanding if there's a large amount of pollution in the atmosphere, and that's been used quite a lot around smart roads, reducing performance, the actual speed limits on those when we're getting an increase in the amount of pollution in the air. So lots of pieces in that space. Then finally, we come on to the OT data, so operational technology. So this is not the computer systems or these devices. This is pieces of infrastructure within a commercial environment that does something. It could be, water treatment plants, pumps and valves and things showing the operational position of them, the flow of fluid through them, whether that's water, whether that's oil, or even something like a gas being transmitted, pressures and temperatures as well. So we can actually understand what's happening in that system and what's going on with it. And it could be a system that stretches over hundreds, if not thousands of miles with some kind of pipeline, or it could be one installation that's sat in a single physical space, but you might want to watch the actual workflow, the flow of what's happening through that system, especially if it's something that's taking one component and converting it into something else. So, generating some kind of consumable medium that's going through that system as well. So, in a oil environment, you might be taking crude oil in one end and you're converting it to some other derivative at the other end, and looking at the stages in that process and the equipment that's been used to do that. So there's a lot of things that we could do on this OT side as well. But if we consider what we're trying to achieve is, one, capture this information. We talked before, we're ingesting that data information from OT, IT and IoT devices. We're going to store it somewhere, and we've got to make a decision on how much of we store. And if we're looking at, say, metric data, how much of that information do we need to keep afterwards? Because we may have actually converted that into some kind of insight data. So once we've done that, do we need to keep the raw data? So it's looking at that and how long we store that information for. But also there's process on the back of it. What do we do with that information afterwards? Is it something we're just actually displaying information with? Are we doing any kind of automation or anything? So a lot of things we've got to consider with that, that information, that metric and event data. But if we consider the key things we might want to do is monitor. keep an eye on what's happening. We might need to display some metrics on the back of that. So looking at, a set of IT infrastructure and providing some data dashboards that show, how effective or efficient that network is being in passing data across it, whether that's a large telco environment or a small S&B environment where a customer's got a small network with a number of computers connected to it. It could be also that event piece. We're receiving events. Got to need to make decision whether the event needs to be dealt with. Does anything need to be done with that event, or is this an event that we might want to record for future use? Yeah. Are we also then looking to do things like automation? So are we taking an event and making a decision on whether we have to automate that? So in an IT environment, restarting a process in a system, in an OT environment, changing the position of a valve or reducing or increasing flow on a pump. Yeah. Are we also going to notify someone? Are we going to tell the ops team that there's a situation happening? Are we going to notify a third-party vendor about a piece of equipment that's been used in that technical environment? Are we just going to display that information on a dashboard? So there's a lot of things we've got to consider. But from our perspective and from a Diamanti Mundi point of view, what are we going to use to store that information? Where are we going to put it? And commonly today we use two different types of storage mediums. We can use a specific database, or we can actually use some kind of syslog capture environment that can capture both events and also metrics on there. So one of the commonest ones would be something like Splunk, a very, very big and mature technology nowadays that we can throw massive amounts of information into. We can store it in context, and then what we can do is we can use that information to correlate between different items that are in there, and we can also then make some decision making based on thresholds and things. Commonly quite a manual process there, but what we could do is we could incorporate something like machine learning and artificial intelligence into that to get a better view of what's happening there over time, and also using that artificial intelligence machine learning to make some decisions on that, as well as provide some insight into what's happening. We could also use that AI machine learning to reduce the amount of false positive we're having, because it could be a seasonal related issue. So when I say seasonal, I don't mean autumn, winter, spring. It could be that every Thursday night this happens, so we should be aware of that and take account of that in what we see. It could be that every Sunday evening we do a backup and we know that the network slows down during that point in time. Again, we need to understand that. But also, we need to also consider entity relationships in IT. That could be, things like network components and how they attach physical or virtual workloads to a network. In a technical environment, it's a pipeline with pumps and valves and how the entities relate to one another through that environment as well. And also in an IoT environment, we might be looking at correlating data from multiple sensors across multiple points on, say, the side of a road or in a particular area within a city centre. So we've got to consider all those and how we use machine learning and artificial intelligence to do that. I keep looking at my notes to make sure I keep my process of thought going with it. But Splunk, Elasticsearch, and also in the AI machine learning space, things like TensorFlow or equivalents are going to be really important. And I think the key thing there is not only the workload that we're running, that Splunk or Elasticsearch component and how we run it in containers or virtual machines, but also the data itself and what we do with that data. And there's two types of data. There's that ingest data, but also is what we create, the output of what we're doing with it as well, and what we do with that data. If you consider something like an AI machine learning type environment, we give it data sets to look at and review. And then what we do is we get some kind of insight data out of it. We may need that somewhere or use that as a trigger for a further event, further down in that process. But if we come back to Splunk and Elastic, we're generating large amounts of volume of data, processing that data and making some decisions, and then again, we need to be able to move that data somewhere, to another stage of that process. So having the ability not only to run workloads, but also to be able to replicate that data to places and the right data is a critical thing. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is people starting to use these hybrid cloud environments, but also a set of replicated data between those container environments to be able to achieve those. So hopefully that's been of interest and sparked some thoughts in your minds. I'm always thinking about how you can use these container-based workloads and how we can actually add value to what people are trying to do within these IoT, OT, and IT environments, and then take that next stage further and how that incorporates into the operational management of that infrastructure. So tomorrow we're going to talk about Tintri, and we've got a bit of AI Ops piece in that. But when we come to Wednesday, we're doing our Ops Ramps Wednesday, and we've got a number of things to think about there. Is how do we take that information and create some kind of automation? Are we using something like Terraform to create additional facilities to be able to replicate data to part of that workflow? Are we going to use something like Ansible to extract data from a particular set of data that's been generated in Splunk or Elasticsearch and push that into the next stage of the process somewhere? And where is that? How are we going to move that data? How are we going to secure it as well? So there's lots of things that we can consider, and they all fit together in the kind of things that we talk about usually at 3 o'clock every day of the week. So hopefully that's been of interest to you. I also hope that you come back and join me tomorrow at 3 o'clock to do our regular Tintri Tuesday, and then following on Wednesday with our Ops Ramp Wednesday. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you had a good day.